I want to call your attention this morning to the Gospel of Mark, Mark chapter 3, verses 20 through 27. Mark chapter 3, verses 20 through 27. And we'll get to the text as we move forward. I want to deal this morning, for the brief time that we shall share, I want to deal with the thought of the life and times of J.C., a Messiah misunderstood. The life and times of J.C., a Messiah misunderstood. But one of the things I tried to take advantage of since the snow and the ice was here last week, I tried to do a little binge watching on my movies, and I decided that I needed to watch Frozen. Since we were frozen, might as well. But I've heard so much about the movie, but never had the opportunity to see the movie. And it's a wonderful, if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's a wonderful movie. It's a movie that deals with love, a movie that deals with forgiveness, a movie that deals with sacrifice, but also a movie that deals with sisterhood. And of course, the two primary players in the movie are Anna and Elsa. And Anna and Elsa are sisters, and Elsa possesses this unique power that she can turn anything to ice. So at the beginning of the movie, Anna comes to Elsa's room to obviously do what they usually do, and that's play. And Elsa will oblige Anna when Anna asks Elsa to make ice, and Elsa begins to do it. So in this particular scene in the movie, Elsa begins to make the ice, and Anna keeps going up different levels, and then ultimately she can't keep up with Anna, and she ultimately accidentally zaps her sister with her power. And as a result, her sister is out. So her parents get them together, and they go to this village with these little anointed trolls. These little trolls have the ability, they must be anointed, they have the ability to, again, give Anna her life back. But then they, of course, offer a warning and a caution to the parents, and then the parents bring both of their girls back to their castle. And then at that point, because Elsa made this mistake, her father makes her put gloves on, and he tells her to conceal, not feel. And now Elsa gets locked in her room, away from her sister. So they grow up in the same palace, but they grow up miles apart, because she has to continue to sing and continue to try to keep herself motivated while her sister is on the other side, and they no longer can share the unique bond that they shared before Elsa made one mistake. And thus it's interesting that you can have power, and ultimately, because you've not maybe learned how to deal with it yet or control it yet, you could be demonized or isolated as a result of the power that you have. And as I watch the movie, and I'm wondering how many young people, because I talk to so many that got ability and got power, and because you made one mistake, folk won't allow you to live beyond that mistake. And the more I began to think about that, I couldn't help but then think about the 1977 interview done by Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes, when he interviews concert pianist Vladimir Horowitz. And Horowitz, who had stopped playing at one point for 12 years, but Horowitz at that time was getting 3 times as much as any concert pianist in the whole world. He was getting 80% of the total gate. And so Mike Wallace is in his New York penthouse, and they're talking, and he asked Horowitz, could he play a piece from 1945 that he had played in Central Park? And Horowitz initially is saying, I don't remember the piece. It's been 32 years ago. And all of a sudden, Horowitz's wife says, get over on the piano. So he sits down on the piano, and he begins to play that piece. Again, although he hadn't played it in 32 years, because it was in him, it ultimately began to come out. And he played so wonderfully, played so passionately, played so powerfully. And he ultimately begins to tell Mike Wallace that when I was a child, though, I played so well that they thought I was possessed by the devil. And that's just interesting to me. It's interesting that one could do something so passionately, one could do something so powerfully, and one could do something so consistently that it could then become equated with evil. And oftentimes, I understand the devil does give people ability, but oftentimes we give the enemy too much power. Oftentimes we give the enemy too much credit. And what does it mean to have power? And what does it mean to have something working in you and through you at that level that it could ultimately be mischaracterized and ultimately be misunderstood? As I was having a conversation with a young brother and his younger sister recently, a sister helped me put this together, and she began to talk. We began to talk about spirituality. We began to talk about the significance of spirituality in our growth and our maturity and development. And the notion of Jesus came up. And she ultimately kind of convicted me and challenged me a little bit, because she said, sometimes you all in the church spend more time on his death than you do on his life. She said, I understand the significance of him rising from the dead. And I understand that's powerful. I understand that's why you all have the tree. I mean, you have a right to the tree of life. But sometimes for some of us, and this is what she told me, sometimes we need you to humanize him a little bit. We need you to help us understand how he relates to me at a young level, at a teenage level, at a young adult level. So I understand about his death. But tell me a little bit more about his life. And I couldn't help then but be caught up with what Will Smith playing Dr. Bennett Omalu in Concussions, and Dr. Omalu again seeing that unique head trauma that he ultimately was able to discover, and seeing it resulting looking like Alzheimer's, but yet it was something different taking place in NFL players. And one of the things that he says in the movie, as he's even talking to the bodies of those whom he's trying to help ultimately uncover what this disease is, he said, if I understood how they lived, then I'll know why they died. If I can begin to ultimately put together the pieces of the things that they did in their life, I understand why they died. And when we talk about Jesus sometimes, yes, we talk about why he died. Why he died was to fulfill what the prophets and what Scripture had written. He died to what? Reconcile us back to God. He died in order that we might have a right to the tree of life. He died in order that we might have power over evil spirits and over sickness and disease. But every now and again, let's really begin to think about, let's really begin to talk about, let's really begin to construct the narrative as it pertains to how did he live? Which ultimately was the cause of his death. And although Jesus lived a righteous life, and although Jesus lived a holy life, Jesus also lived a hard knock life. Instead of treats, we get kicked. I mean, when you really think about his life, it was hard knock life. Somebody don't believe me. Well, consider his history as a child. First, he is born out of scandal. Mary is at the center of the original scandal. Way before Shonda and way before Carrie and way before Olivia Pope, the real scandal was the scandal of Mary being impregnated by the Holy Spirit. So he is born into scandal. But if that isn't enough, he's then born with a price on his head. Matthew chapter 2, Herod says to the wise men, as Herod knows that his time is coming to an end, as Herod knows that a new baby king is born, and this king shall bring about justice, Herod says to the wise men, come here, fellas. I want you all to tell me where the Christ child has been born. I want to know so I can go and worship him. So he's born with a price on his head. But then if that wasn't enough, Joseph, being warned in a dream, was warned by the Spirit, get up, take him and his mama, and y'all run to Egypt. So he born in the scandal. There's a price on his head, and now they got to move from city to city. They on the run. So then, not until the Spirit of the Lord reveals in another dream, now you can take him back, because those who wanted to kill your son, the powers that be that wanted to destroy your son, they've now died. And ultimately then he comes back to Nazareth. But then as he grows up, he's constantly living with the reality of people saying, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Constantly living with a stigma based upon how he was born, because you know folk gossiping. Based upon the fact that they left and nobody saw y'all for a little while. Based upon the fact that he ultimately does not come from royalty in the sense of what they were expecting, but yet comes from a carpenter. Joseph is a carpenter. And so Jesus has to grow up being constantly misunderstood and constantly mischaracterized. So now Jesus comes back on the scene in Mark chapter 1, is baptized by his cousin, and gets straight on his holy hustle. Gets straight on his gospel grind and goes straight to work. Understanding the sense of urgency, Jesus goes straight to work. What does he do? Initially in Mark chapter 1, Jesus goes into the temple, teaches with power, and casts out demons. The demon even recognized who Jesus is, and the people in the temple say, who is this with this new teaching? Because he's teaching like one with power, not like the religious and spiritual folk that's supposed to be teaching us. The Pharisees and the scribes here know the word, but yet there is no power in their teaching. Then Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law. Then Jesus heals those who have all manner of diseases. Then Jesus heals a man who has leprosy. Then Jesus forgives a paralytic man and heals him as well, after his friends tear off the roof and they lower him down. And Jesus said, because of your faith, your brother will be healed. And then if that wasn't enough, Jesus then heals a man with a withered hand, but he does it on the Sabbath. So as a result of him doing something outside of the purview of the religious leadership, because he didn't ask for permission to do it, and because he didn't come back and check with them after he had done it, there are those who want to plot and conspire to kill him. Based upon him walking in his gift and doing that which God had called him to do. And if that wasn't enough, he heals right in Matthew chapter 3 before these verses. He heals some more folk of diseases, but then he gives power to heal and to cast out demons to 12 others. But what's interesting is that these 12 don't come from royalty. What's interesting is that these 12 don't come from the palace, but these 12, Matthew, a tax collector, others who are fishermen, and then even getting Judas, who he knew was going to betray him. But then he even had a gangster on his squad. Y'all know who I'm talking about in the form of Peter, who had a problem with his tongue and with his hands. You remember Peter in the garden slicing off ears, and Jesus got to, come on, Peter, put that up. So I'm just saying, Jesus had a crew now. Jesus had a clique. Okay, Jesus had a gang, if you really want to think about it. Can you imagine 13 of them walking down Samaria's road? Can you imagine 13 of them coming through to what transformed the landscape? And as I said before, I ain't got a problem with a gang, but what does your gang represent? Does your gang come to bring life, or does it come to bring death? Does your gang come to destroy, or does it come to build? Does your gang come to include or exclude? Jesus had a gang, but when they came through, the landscape was never the same. Jesus had a gang, but when they came through, bodies were healed, eyesight was given back, and ultimately the power of God was made manifest. And you do know over time, things have got distorted. You know what the original intent of the Crips was? CRIP stands for Community Revolution in Progress. That's what it stood for. Then over time, things got distorted as a result of deindustrialization and other economic realities that hit the African American community. But Jesus got the nerve to get with him 12 cats from outside the church. So now, as a result of all of this work that he's done, you would think he would be celebrated. You would think he would be appreciated. And what happens is that power in the life of Christ, you see that power and pain are constantly connected. And what if, and that's sometimes why it's difficult, what if that which God has given you the ability to do brings you more sorrow than joy? What if that which God has given you the ability to do brings you more grief than good? What if what God has given you the ability to do brings you more criticism than celebration? What if what God has given you the ability to do brings more words of accusation and less words of affirmation as a result of you making a decision to live for Christ? Well, I think Christ can provide us with some help today as it pertains to if you are misunderstood. So this is a word for some of my artists. This is a word for some of my organizers. And this is a word for some of those who sometimes don't feel as though you got visions, you got dreams, you got ideas, you got creative energy in you. And sometimes it can be very distorted and misunderstood. So after Jesus has done all of this work and now got his crew, look at how he's responded to. Verse 20, then Jesus entered the house again, and a crowd gathered so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he out of his mind. I'm in the text. And the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said, he is possessed by Beelzebub. By the prince of demons, he is driving out demons. Now, take into consideration that his own family has characterized Jesus as crazy. Not crazy in the sense of silly, funny, you can't wait to see him coming because they're crazy, will do anything, but crazy in the sense that he must have lost it in terms of look who he's around and look who he's giving power to. And you have to consider the notion of him giving power to the people. You have to remember initially, everybody doesn't want the people to be empowered. Everybody does not want the people to be empowered. When you take into consideration what happened in Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen becomes a problem because Katniss begins to what? Empower regular folk. Katniss begins to represent hope for the hopeless. She begins to represent strength for the weak. She begins to represent transformation for those who are in need of hope. So she becomes a problem. But then when you consider the work of the Black Panthers, because if you let the narrative be told in regular mass media and history, they distort what the Panthers did initially. When you begin to think about the fact that they were feeding up to 20,000 children every day. When you begin to think about the fact that they were doing sickle cell research. Why? Because they wanted to give real power. And I know I got some ex-Panthers up in here. Y'all be acting like that. But I know some of y'all was following that back in the day because y'all wanted to have what? Power to the people one time. But then when you begin to think about the work of Martin and Malcolm, and nobody talks about where they were at the end of their life as they were getting ready to connect, which the world surely did not want to happen because it was going to empower not only people in America, but it was also going to empower those on the African continent. And everybody ain't pleased when ordinary folks seem to operate in extraordinary power. Everybody is not pleased when those who you consider unclean and those who you consider outcasts and those who you consider unworthy, and because they ain't got a degree from this school and because they don't come from this school, everybody is not appreciative of the fact that Jesus is bringing revolution from the synagogue to the street. And see, the work of ministry should take you to the suite, to the sanctuary, and to the street. I'm talking about the meal work of ministry. We just come back here to get refueled, replenished, revived, and re-energized. What? To go back out there and let our light so shine before men and women that when they see us, when they hear us, and when they encounter us, that they glorify the God that is within us. So now, Jesus, after doing all of this work, after living on purpose and in purpose, his own folks saying he must be crazy. Can I tell you something initially? You have to remember that your relationship with Christ is always going to invite something. Always. One day it could be light. The next day it could be, and the whole notion, I figure sometimes why we don't want to shine sometimes is because I thought about this. You know, light, while it uncovers and while light reveals, we know particularly down in the South, in the summertime, light also attracts mosquitoes. Light also can attract moths, right? Like a moth to a flame. I mean, light also attracts spiders. It attracts those things that possibly can harm us. So that's why some of us do not shine. But the reality of it is that if you got a relationship with the Lord, at some point, you're going to attract something. You would hope it's more blessings than burdens. You would hope it's more grace than grief. But every now and again, if you decided to be, and see, we sing them songs sometimes, I'm a soldier in the army of the Lord. All right, we say that. But when it's time to battle, we ready to tuck and go home. No. We got weapons. We got weapons, and they not carnal. We got spiritual weapons and spiritual ability. But then his family says he's crazy, so your family won't always understand you, young folk. And it's okay. You got to pray for them sometime. That's what I tell them. Sometimes you better be careful. Somebody drawing and doodling. One of my students, his parents and folk didn't see it. I said, okay, now his gift going to get all of y'all out of poverty. You understand that? Now, so you may want to help him out. But then it says that the scribes say about Jesus, and the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said, he is possessed by Beelzebub, by the prince of demons. He is casting out demons. Allow me to suggest to you, secondly, just because folk know the word don't mean they live the word. Now, the teachers of the law, they are interpreters of the law. But what has happened is that the law then becomes so legalistic, and so there is no room for grace. There is no room for forgiveness. There is no room for love. And that's why Jesus said, I didn't come to abolish the law. I came to fulfill the law. So when we talk about loving neighbor as thyself, I came to actually demonstrate to you what that means. And it means touching the untouchable. It means going into places where sometimes I have to deal with pain. And then sometimes as a result, I got my own pain I got to deal with. But the reality of it is that some folk who know word from front to back, seemingly been in church for decades, but where is the patience? But where is the kindness? Where is the fruit? And I think Jesus said something about them trees that continue to live and don't bear fruit. I think they get chopped up. So you always got to remember that just because some folk know the word, they ultimately don't necessarily embody the word in a way that reflects the love, life, and liberatory spirit of Jesus Christ. And you really have to start to consider that if the character and the work of the devil is to steal, kill, and destroy, and all Jesus did was give back, bring new life, and restore, how does that get misinterpreted and distorted based upon what we know the devil does? And Jesus is doing everything that's exactly opposite of what the devil does. But even in the church, when folk got power, you can represent a threat to the power. And what Jesus represented was because he was empowering poor folk, and because he was setting captives free, and because he was opening eyes, and because he was dealing with the folk that they wouldn't even let come in the church. He became a problem and a threat to the religious establishment. So when folk can't control you and when folk can't contain you, they will just assassinate your character. So the teachers of the law say he is the enemy. The teachers of the law say he is the devil. Why? Because they know they losing grip on their foolishness. And the people begin to recognize that, guess what? The demons obey him. The demons call him the Son of God. These individuals who know the word, are interpreters of the word, understand the tradition, they ain't got no power though, because the demons respond to him. And we see folks' bodies getting changed. We see folks' lives getting changed. And the scribes say, it must be the devil. And then look at how Jesus, I love him. Look at how Jesus then responds. He don't get upset. Don't go straight on Insta and get, trigger fingers turn Twitter fingers kind of stuff. He don't get on Twitter. Don't go 0 to 100 real quick. He just keep it 8 more than 92 with him. Listen to what he says. So Jesus called them over to him, and he began to speak in parables, using language that they understand. And he asked this simple question. This is why they couldn't deal with him, Mother Harrison. He said, how can Satan drive out Satan? Jesus is like, I'm perplexed, y'all. Y'all teachers of the law, so y'all understand the work of what Satan is. Y'all understand, yes, he's a disgruntled employee. He got kicked out of heaven, but y'all do understand what his work is. But my question still, this is Jesus, how can Satan drive out Satan? I'm confused. If a kingdom is divided among itself, the kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. Allow me to suggest to you thirdly, even if you misunderstood, like Christ, you got to respond to the lies and accusation with tact and facts. That's right. Every now and again, you're going to have to respond to some accusations and some lies and some rumors. Don't respond. Don't get upset. Respond to it like Christ, with tact and with some facts. So again, because he is the living word of God, he so easily responds to their accusations. And of course, I can't help but think about what's been in the news this week, particularly as it pertains to what they're saying that Cam Newton is going to be the most polarizing figure at this year's 50th Super Bowl. And it's quite interesting to me the way in which Cam has always dealt with criticism, but the way he's dealt with criticism at another level this year. Well, let's see if we can run down the facts real quick. Cam Newton, again, first quarterback in NFL history to throw for 30 touchdowns and rush for 10. Got the Carolina Panthers 17-1 going into the Super Bowl. Has put an emphasis on teams, so much so that he texts Michael Orr, who you all remember from The Blind Side. He texted Michael Orr last year when nobody else wanted to deal with Orr, and Orr was sitting at his home on his couch, and he told Orr, I need you here, because Cam's brother Cecil had told him about Michael Orr's work ethic for the Baltimore Ravens, and he said, that's who you need as your left tackle. And he called Michael Orr and brought him to Carolina. Now they in the Super Bowl. I'm just saying, brother got a lot of emphasis on team. Then started the Sunday football giveaway, and at first they were saying he was getting fined for giving away the footballs, and they said now you get fined if you throw a football in the crowd, but not if you give one to a child. So there are those who are saying he danced too much. There are those who are saying he smiled too much. There are those who are saying he causes too much confusion on the sideline, taking selfies with his teammates. And of course, he responded this week and just simply said, I've been trying not to go there, and I've been trying not to say it, but I'm an African-American quarterback, and they ain't never seen nothing like me, and ain't really nothing for y'all to compare me to. So I understand why. I mean, Cam didn't get upset. He didn't cuss nobody out. Cam just said, I understand you having a hard time dealing with 6'5", 245 pounds that could run and throw like this and still love his teammates and showing I'm having a time of my life. I understand. I understand. Y'all want to hate instead of celebrate. It's all right. It's all right. Y'all will be all right. Because he possibly stands now as the first quarterback that can win not only a championship at the junior college level, not only a championship at the Division I level, but possibly if he wins next week, he'll then be the only player in the history of the NFL to do that too. So it's a lot of stuff that's at play right here. But when I thought about why Cam acts like he acts, Why Cam? And I found out his daddy was a preacher. I just found that out in the break. But understanding that Cam obviously had got the word put in him early. But then what the media has a way of very interestingly leaving out of the conversation about the brother is that in December of 2014, he was in a car wreck. And the truck flipped over multiple times. Ain't no way in the world he should have walked away from that accident. So next time, maybe when you see him next Sunday and he go ahead and dab on you one time, maybe you'll understand why my worship maybe is a little real. You don't know my story. You don't know the things that I've been through. But let me tell you, my worship, yeah, it's for real. That will get left out of the equation that God spared his life. So it ain't no coincidence and it ain't no accident that he balling like he done lost his mind this year. And the question is, are you going to let Cam dance by himself? That's the real question, because I know some folk up in here. I saw a picture this week of somebody who was in a car accident and they should be dead, but angels been watching over me night in. Somebody talk to me up in here. So don't allow nobody to make you feel guilty. Don't allow nobody to make you not praise God. If you at Green Hills and it hits you, tell him thank you. If you're walking down the aisle at Kroger and it hits you, tell him thank you. If you need to pull over on Briley, tell him thank you. Wherever it is. Don't let nobody shame you into not praising God. Don't let nobody make you feel guilty for what the Lord has done in your life. Go ahead and bless him one time. Go ahead. He's worthy. Worthy of the praise. Worthy of the honor. Worthy of the glory. Oh God, we bless you. We magnify you. We lift your name on high. Worthy God. Worthy God. Worthy God. Worthy God. Worthy God. Yeah. Give it to him. That's why tears be running down my eyes. And if you get too loud, just ask him to move over. Because I need to tell God thank you. Been better to me than I've been to myself. So Jesus says to them, how can Satan drive out Satan? He says, what Jesus reminds us of right here is that like Christ, you got to shine light on the bigger picture. And see, what they're trying to do is get him into a back and forth. They're trying to get him into an argument to ultimately validate his messiahship. They're trying to make him validated. But the fact that Jesus said that if Satan opposes himself and is divided, he cannot stand, his end has come. And what Jesus is saying, that the kingdom of God in my presence is right here. So Satan can no longer operate like he's been operating. Satan can no longer continue to destroy you. Satan can no longer keep you bound. And by Jesus saying this, lastly, Jesus reminds us that God will prevail. And ultimately, we will have the victory. If we faint not, we will have the victory. And I've been talking to some young folk this week struggling with homelessness, struggling with trying to process their trauma, struggling with trying to deal with compounded poverty. And ultimately, I got to pray with them and tell them that God is not forgotten about you. And the word reminds us in Romans chapter 8, verse 37, that know in all of these things that we are more than, talk to me, conquerors, not of our own accord, not of our own ability, but we're more than conquerors through him that loved us. But then Galatians 6:9 reminds us, and this is a word for somebody today, and do not be weary in your well-doing, for if you faint not, It says in due season before the faint. In due season. Somebody, you on the right, you on the edge right now of your due season. And you can't let go of the plow now. Because there is a promise that a harvest is on the way. There's a promise that the windows of heaven are getting ready to open up and pour you out a blessing that you won't have room enough to receive it. So tell somebody, it's okay if you talk about me. It's okay if you misunderstand me. It's okay if you assassinate my character. Why? Because you're making me look less like me and more like him. It's okay if you talk about where I come from. It's okay if you talk about my clothes. But understand, the more you talk about me, the more I trust in him. The more you criticize me, the more I lean on him. The more you assassinate my character, the more and longer I fast. The more you begin to doubt if God is in me, the more God continues to show me his power, show me his grace, and show me his love. So is there anybody in the house this morning that you glad that he was willing to be misunderstood? You glad that he was willing to be mischaracterized? You glad that he was willing to get his character assassinated? But if that wasn't enough, he was big enough to carry the weight of our sin all the way to Calvary's cross and ultimately go down into a grave, snatch the keys from hell, and then on the third day morning, the one who was misunderstood, the one who was mischaracterized, the one who was called the devil, got up not with some power, got up not with a little power, got up with all power in his hands. And the blessing of it is that you got that same power to cast out demons. You got that same power to declare war against the enemy. You got that same power to speak and folks' bodies are healed. Is there anybody in here this morning? Would you turn to your neighbor and tell them we got power? We got power. Power that the world didn't give. Power that the world can't take away. This joy that I have because of that power. The world didn't give it to me. And the world can't take it away. And there's somebody here. You were misunderstood as a child. You've been misunderstood as an adult. And all that time trying to work through and process. And you were misunderstood because you were gifted. You were misunderstood because God had put something special in you. And just because something is special in you, everybody else around you ain't ready for it. So that's why you got to pray for folk. Jesus said they don't know what they're doing. And I close with this story. I remember some years ago, I was at the A. Philip Randolph conference, and Tashina Arnold, who played Pam on Martin, she came and sang, just tore the house up. And Tashina began to tell a story about how when she was a little girl, she was in acting classes, she was taking tap, dance, and she grew up Pentecostal and some apostolic. And so some of the folks were saying her doing the acting and the dancing, that was of the devil, that wasn't Christ-like. And word got round to her bishop. And her bishop called her one Sunday morning, called her in front of the whole congregation. And he said, I heard you all been saying some thing, and this is a little girl now. I heard you all been saying some mean things about this little girl. He said, what you all better understand is that God got something real special for her life, and you all better keep your mouth off of her. Because you have no clue of who God will use, where they will come from, and how far God wants. And we living witnesses up in here today. Where we live, what we drive, jobs we have, and the opportunities it wasn't supposed to happen. And people can't understand it. That's why they hate on you, because they just trying to wrap their mind around it, and it don't seem right. You ain't got the education qualifications. You ain't got the seniority, but God just keep on doing stuff for you. So understand that as that happens in your life, you look more like Jesus than you thought you did. You actually looking like the same one who had to deal with family history. Looking like the same one who the folk that ultimately he came to help persecuted him. but also looking like the same one that can say, I forgive you and I love you and I pray God's blessing upon you. The doors of the church are open this morning.